Picture a Sunday morning in a quiet Kansas suburb, where the air is filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the ringing of church bells. In the front pew sits a man of impeccable character, his head bowed in deep, seemingly sincere prayer. He holds a well-worn Bible in his steady hands, his voice rising in harmony with the choir as they sing hymns of mercy and grace. To everyone in that sanctuary, he is the embodiment of a God-fearing citizen, a man you would trust with your secrets, your community, even your life. But as he closes his eyes to pray, he isn't reflecting on Scripture. He is reliving the chilling details of his latest project. This is the terrifying duality of Dennis Rader, a man who spent 30 years mastering the art of the masquerade. By day, he was a dedicated compliance officer, meticulously patrolling the streets of Park City to ensure every lawn was mowed and every rule was followed. He was a leader of Boy Scouts, teaching young boys about honor, and a president of the church council, managing the sacred affairs of his congregation. He was the perfect neighbor, a man who existed so far above suspicion that he became invisible. He was the light side of a psyche that held a cavernous, rotting darkness just beneath the surface. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the Bible was set aside, and the rope came out. The same hands that passed the communion plate on Sunday were used to tie intricate, inescapable knots on Monday. He called each defector she's a nameless, predatory hunger for dominance in terror that turned his neighbors into targets in their homes into hunting grounds. He didn't just kill, he lingered in the silence of his victim's fear, savoring the slow, ritualistic transition from life to death. He was a ghost in a compliance officer's uniform, a monster hiding behind a badge in a hymn book. For 3 decades, the city of Wichita lived under the suffocating shadow of a phantom they called BTK. Families double-locked their doors and looked sideways at strangers, never imagining that the man they were running from was the one standing right next to them at the grocery store. Rader thrived on this collective panic, fueling each with cryptic letters and sadistic poems sent to the media, mocking the authorities who were searching for a monster that looked like a monster. He played a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek with human lives, confident that his mask of boring, suburban normalcy was impenetrable. Today, we are peeling back that mask to reveal the chilling mechanics of a double life that defied logic and haunted a nation. How does a man reconcile the sacred with the profane? How does a pillar of the community become a predator who binds, tortures, and kills without a shred of remorse? This is the definitive unmask of the Deacon of Darkness, a journey into the heart of a man who held a Bible in one hand and a rope in the other. Welcome to the cold, calculated reality of Dennis Rader. This is Behind the Mask. Welcome to Behind the Mask True Crime Stories, the place where we peel back the layers of the world's most chilling cases to find the truth hidden in the shadows. I am your narrator, and today we are diving deep into a case that redefined the meaning of the word neighbor. The story of Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer, is not just a chronicle of crimes, but a terrifying study in psychological compartmentalization. Before we descend into the darkness of Wichita, I want to take a moment to welcome our growing community of mystery seekers. If you are fascinated by the darker side of human nature and the complexities of criminal minds, you've found your home. This channel is dedicated to exploring the cases that haunt us, and we can't do it without your support. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a revelation. Your like on this video helps us reach more people who share our passion for justice and storytelling. But more importantly, I want to hear from you. The true crime community is global. It's incredible to see how these stories resonate across borders. Please, drop a comment below and let us know which country you are watching from today. Are you joining us from the heart of the ultrasonography, the misty streets of London, or perhaps somewhere in South America or Asia? Also, let me know if you've heard of the BTK case before, if this is your first time hearing the chilling details of the Deacon of Darkness. Your engagement helps this channel grow and allows us to keep bringing you these high-quality, deep-dive documentaries. Now, settle in, dim the lights, and prepare yourself. We are about to begin Chapter 1 of a nightmare 30 years in the making. The winter of 1974 brought a biting cold to Wichita, Kansas, but inside the Otero home on Edgemore Street, life felt warm and settled. Joseph Otero, a retired Air Force officer, and his wife Julie were the anchors of a bustling household of 4 children. They were a family built on discipline and love, the kind of people who represented the rock-solid foundation of Middle America. They woke up on the morning of January 15th unaware that their home had already been marked by a predator. For weeks, a man had been observing their routines, memorizing the rhythm of their lives from the safety of the shadows. He didn't see them as neighbors. He saw them as a projectile testing his dark capabilities. Dennis Rader was not a man of impulse. He was a man of preparation. He had spent years nurturing a secret internal landscape filled with fantasies of bondage and absolute control, and the Otero family was to be his first real-world masterpiece. He waited until the older children had left for school, leaving Joseph, Julie, and two younger children, Joseph Jr. and Josephine, vulnerable. Carrying a bag filled with ropes and a handgun, he approached the door. He wasn't a monster in a movie. He was a polite stranger, someone you wouldn't hesitate to answer the door for. That was his greatest weapon, the ability to look completely utterly harmless. He gained entry through a simple ruse, a lie about needing help that dissolved the moment he crossed the threshold. Once inside, the atmosphere shifted from suburban peace to a waking nightmare. Rader brandished his weapon, his heart racing with the surge of Factor X. He forced the family into a bedroom, his movements clinical and cold. The Oteros, confused and terrified, complied, likely believing this was a simple robbery, a terrifying ordeal, but one they could survive. They could not have imagined that the man standing before them didn't want their money. He wanted their finite moments of life. This was where the being his self-given acronym was born, BIND. Rader began the ritualistic tying of his victims, using ropes to immobilize them in ways that were designed to humiliate and terrify. He was obsessed with the knots, the tension, and the absolute helplessness of his hitches. As he bound Joseph and Julie, the professional compliance he would later use in his day job was already evident. He was a bureaucrat of death, organizing the scene with a chilling lack of empathy, treating the human beings before him like items on a checklist. The horror intensified as Rader separated the family. He led the parents into one room and the children into others, ensuring that the sounds of their muffled struggles would be the last things they heard. In the parents' bedroom, the struggle for survival turned into a desperate, silent plea. Rader strangled Joseph first, then Julie, watching with a detached, almost scientific curiosity as the light left their eyes. To him, this wasn't a murder in the heat of passion. It was an achievement. He was finally manifesting the Factor X that had haunted his dreams for so long. But the basement of the Otero house held the most harrowing chapter of that morning. Rader took 8-year-old Joseph Jr. and 9-year-old Josephine to the lower level. What occurred there was a level of depravity that Wichita had never seen. He placed a plastic bag over the boy's head, listening to his desperate gasps for air. He then turned his attention to Josephine, hanging her from a pipe he had twisted to blow that would haunt investigators for decades. This wasn't just killing. It was a ritual of dominance, a way for a nobody like Rader to feel like a god. After the house grew silent, Rader didn't flee a panic. He lingered. He moved through the rooms of the Otero home with the calm of a man who belonged there. He took trophies, small personal items that would allow him to relive the crimes later in the privacy of his own home. He even sat down and ate some of the family's food, a casual act of intrusion that highlighted his complete lack of human feeling. He then stepped out into the cold January air, blended back into the neighborhood, and vanished into the fog of ordinary life. Later that afternoon, the older Otero siblings returned home from school, expecting a normal afternoon of homework and chores. Instead, they walked into a tomb. The discovery of their family's bodies was a seismic event that shattered the city's sense of security. The police were mad with a crime scene so brutal and so devoid of motive that each left them paralyzed. There were no signs of forced entry, no obvious suspects, and no clear reason why a quiet Air Force family would be targeted for such a slaughter. The shadow on a Dijimur had left no footprint. For Dennis Rader, the weeks following the murders were a period of intense satisfaction. He watched the news, read the papers, and listened to the whispers of fear at the grocery store. He was the cause of all of it. He went to work, he interacted with his wife, he perhaps even attended church, all while carrying the secret of the Otero massacre like a hidden treasure. He had successfully transitioned from a dreamer of violence to a practitioner of it, and he found that he had a natural talent for the mask. The Dijimur murders would officially go cold, becoming a dark legend in Kansas. The police were looking for a drifter, a maniac, or a career criminal. They were indeed looking for a man who followed the rules and respected authority. Rader had learned his most important lesson. As long as the mask was polished and the light side was visible, the dark side could do whatever it wanted. The nightmare of the Otero family was just the prologue. The Deacon of Darkness had tasted blood, and he was already looking for his next project. By the autumn of 1974, the initial hash of the Otero murders had begun to settle into a cold, frustrating silence for Dennis Rader. He was a man who thrived on order and recognition, each bond him to see the police chasing ghosts and dead ends. To the world, the Edgemur massacre was a tragic mystery. To Rader, it was his magnum opus, and he was tired of being an anonymous author. He realized that a monster without a name is soon forgotten, and his ego bloated by his successful evasion of the law demanded a spotlight. He decided it was time to introduce himself to the city he intended to haunt, not as a neighbor, but as a legend. In October 1974, he made his first move toward infamy. He left a letter hidden inside a mechanical engineering textbook in the Wichita Public Library, made an anonymous call to a local newspaper to reveal its location. When the police retrieved the letter, they didn't find the rumblings of a madman, but a cold, calculated manifesto of terror. Rader spoke of the Oteros with a chilling lack of remorse, but more importantly, he demanded that the media give him a name. He suggested several titles, but he insisted on the one that would eventually freeze the blood of every citizen in Kansas: BTK. These three letters bind, torture, kill were more than just a description of his methods. They were a brand. By naming his darkness, Rader separated the man who attended church from the predator who stalked the streets. He was no longer just Dennis. He was an entity, a force of nature that the authorities could not grasp. This communication shifted the power dynamic entirely. The police were no longer just investigating a crime. They were now participants in a twisted game of cat and mouse, and BTK was the one writing the rules. As the mid-70s progressed, Rader's light side continued to flourish. He was building a life of absolute conventionality, working for a home security company, a job that, with sickening irony, gave him access to the very homes he studied as projects. He was learning the vulnerabilities of the suburban fortress, all while his factories simmered just beneath the surface. He spent his days installing alarms to keep people safe and his nights imagining how to bypass them. The mask was hardening, becoming a seamless part of his identity. In March 1977, the silence of the BTK persona ended with the targeting of Shirley Vian. Rader gained entry to her home by once again using a ruse, but this time, he was confronted by her three young children. In a display of cold-blooded efficiency that defied human comprehension, he forced the children into a bathroom and locked the door. He told them to be quiet, as if he were a babysitter or a family friend, while he proceeded to murder their mother in the next room. Their muffled cries and the scratch of their fingernails against the bathroom door became the background music to his latest atrocity. The murder of Shirley Vian was a testament to Rader's psychological detachment. He didn't see the children as victims or even as witnesses who could potentially identify him. He saw them as inconveniences to be managed. He was so confident in his mask and his methods that he felt untouchable. After the act, he slipped away as quietly as he had arrived, leaving the children to be found by neighbors, traumatized by a man they had seen but could never truly describe. BTK had struck again, and the signature was unmistakable, but Rader wasn't finished. In December of the same year, he set his sights on Nancy Fox. He followed her, learned her schedule, he waited until she was home alone. The crime was quick and brutal, executed with the clinical precision of a man who was becoming a professional in the art of death. However, it was what he did after the murder that truly showcased his arrogance. He walked to a public payphone in the freezing night air and called the police dispatcher to report the murder himself. Standing in the shadows of that phone booth, Rader watched as the city's emergency lights began to flicker in the distance. He stayed just long enough to see the first patrol cars race toward the scene he had created. He was the director of a grand, tragic play, and he wanted to see his audience react. In his mind, he was a god, controlling the movements of the police and emotions of the public. He wasn't just a killer, he was a master of ceremonies, and Wichita was his stage. By the end of 1977, the name BTK was whispered in every household in the city. Gun sales plummeted as people realized that a weapon didn't help if you let the killer in through the front door. The police were under immense pressure, forming a special task force that worked around the clock, but they were looking for a shadow. Rader, meanwhile, was the model of suburban stability. He was a father now, a man with a steady job, and a growing reputation in his church. He used his normalcy as a shield, hiding in plain sight with a confidence that borderlined on the supernatural. This chapter of his life was the birth of a legend, a period where the Factor X and the Deacon coexisted in a terrifyingly functional harmony. He had branded himself, he had taunted the authorities, he had claimed martyr lives, all while remaining a respected pillar of his community. The signature of BTK was now etched into the history of American crime, written by a man who held a Bible on Sunday and hunted on Monday. The mask was perfect, and for Dennis Rader, the game was only just beginning. As the 1980s dawned, a heavy, uneasy silence fell over the city of Wichita. The letters from BTK had stopped, and the phantom that had haunted the headlines seemed to have evaporated into the Kansas mist. Till the public, it was a reprieve, a hope that the monster had died or moved on. But for Dennis Rader, this was simply a period of deep hibernation, a calculated evolution. He was no longer a young man acting on raw impulse. He was becoming a master of the long game. He understood that the most effective way to protect his dark side was to make his light side so bright and so busy that no one would ever think to look beneath the surface. During this era, Rader secured a position as a compliance officer for Park City, a hobby that perfectly mirrored his internal need for dominance. This wasn't just a job, it was a legal outlet for his predatory instincts. He spent his days patrolling neighborhoods, issuing citations for overgrown lawns or improperly parked cars, finding a twisted satisfaction in enforcing the rules on others. He was the man you saw every day, the bureaucrat with a clipboard and a stone expression, using the power of the state to satisfy a small fraction of the control he craved. He was a predator hiding behind the shield of minor municipal authority. But his most effective camouflage was found within the walls of the Christ Lutheran Church. Rader didn't just attend services. He became the backbone of the congregation. He was elected president of the church council, a position that required the highest level of trust and integrity. He managed the church's finances, led committee meetings, and was a familiar, comforting presence in the pews every Sunday morning. The same hands that had tightened ropes around the necks of innocent mothers were now used to pass the communion plate and shake the hands of his neighbors. He was a Deacon of Darkness operating in the heart of a sanctuary. His family life was the final piece of the puzzle. Till his wife and children, he was a strict, traditional, and somewhat distant father who was obsessed with order. He led Boy Scout troops through the woods, teaching them the values of citizenship and survival, all while keeping his own survival kit of murder hidden in a locked cabinet. He was a master of the ordinary American life, a man who went on family camping trips and attended school functions, living a life so profoundly boring that it was the perfect defense. He had built a fortress of banality that no detective could penetrate. However, the Factor X was never truly dormant. Even during the years when he wasn't killing, Rader was trolling. He would drive for hours, scouting new projects, taking photographs of women from a distance, and creating elaborate scrapbooks of his fantasies. He called these his mental hits, a way to sustain his dark hunger when the risks of a physical crime were too high. He lived in a state of permanent psychological surveillance, viewing every woman he passed as a potential victim in a movie only he was watching. His mind was a gallery of horrors, neatly tucked behind a pair of sensible glasses. In 1985, the silence was broken in the most personal way possible. Rader targeted his own neighbor, Marine Hedge. He kidnapped her from her home just doors away from where he lived his normal life, and took her to his own church to perform his ritualistic binding a photography. The audacity of using a house of God as a backdrop for his depravity showed the true extent of his arrogance. He then dumped her body on a dirt road, returning to his family as if he had just run a simple errand. The predator had struck again, and he had done it right under the noses of everyone who trusted him. A year later, in 1986, he claimed another victim, Vicky Wegerli. He gained entry to her home by pretending to be a telephone repairman, a ruse that exploited the very sense of safety his daytime job was supposed to uphold. This murder was clinical and fast, but unlike his earlier crimes, he didn't send a letter to the press. He was learning to savor the secret power of his actions. He was a ghost who didn't need the spotlight to feel the thrill of the kill. He was content to let the police struggle with a mounting pile of cold cases, confident that he was smarter than the system he served. The 1990s brought his final physical act of violence, the murder of Dolores Davis in 1991. He kidnapped the elderly woman from her home, drove her to a remote bridge, and strangled her with a pair of pantyhose. He then meticulously photographed her body in various poses, a final act of desecration that fueled his fantasias for anos to come. After the crime, he simply went back to his life as a compliance officer and a church leader. For over a decade after that, he wouldn't kill again, leading men to believe that the BTK Killer was a ghost of the past. Rader's ability to compartmentalize was a psychological marvel of evil. He described his two lives as separate rooms in a house that never shared a door. He could spend an evening stalking a victim, the next morning leading a prayer group without feeling a shred of internal conflict. He didn't see himself as a monster. He saw himself as a man with a condition, a predator who was simply following his nature. This lack of guilt made him the ultimate chameleon, a man who could blend into any environment because he truly believed his own lies. By the end of the 90s, Dennis Rader was a man approaching retirement, a respected elder in his community who had gotten away with 10 murders. He had outlived the investigators who first hunted him and outsmarted the technology of his team. He was a success story of the shadows, a man who had held a Bible in one hand and a rope in the other for 30 years without ever slipping. But as the new millennium approached, his ego began to itch. The world was forgetting BTK, and for a man who believed he was a god, being forgotten was a fate worse than death. For over a decade, the BTK Killer was nothing more than a ghost story, a fading scar on the collective memory of Wichita. But in 2004, the 30th anniversary of the Otero family massacre approached, and the local media began to wonder aloud if the monster was dead or behind bars for another crime. For Dennis Rader, sitting in his quiet home in Park City, this was an unbearable insult. He didn't see himself as a relic of the past. He saw himself as a grandmaster who had never been defeated. His narcissism, fed by 30 years of successful deception, demanded that the world acknowledge his dark genius once again. The mask was about to slip, not because of a detective's brilliance, but because of Rader's own desperate need for an audience. In March 2004, the silence was shattered. A package arrived at the Wichita Eagle, containing photographs of a crime scene and a copy of a victim's driver's license. The message was clear: BTK was back. The city was instantly plunged into a state of retro-terror, a cold shiver that bypassed a whole generation. People who had grown up hearing the legend of the Phantom Killer now realized he was still walking among them. Rader watched the ensuing chaos with the glee of a child. He began sending a series of bizarre packages filled with puzzles, dolls bound in ritualistic poses, in rambling letters that mocked the police's inability to find him. He was reliving his glory days, unaware that the game had fundamentally changed. The police, however, were no longer the hamstring force of the 1970s. They assembled a multi-agency task force and utilized behavioral profilers in the latest digital forensics. They decided to play along with Rader's ego, engaging in a public dialogue through newspaper classifieds. They treated him like the intelligent master he believed he was, lulling him into a false sense of security. Rader, emboldened by his perceived intellectual superiority, began to ask the police technical questions. He wanted to move his communications into the digital age, but he was a man trapped in the analog past. He was about to walk directly into a trap set by his own curiosity. In early 2005, Rader sent a message asking a question that would define the rest of his life: can I communicate with a floppy disk and not be traced? Be honest. The police, through a public message, gave him the answer he wanted to hear: yes, it is Safi. It was a bold, necessary lie. Rader, trusting the very authorities he spent decades mocking, decided to send a purple 144 megabytes Memorex floppy disk to a local television station. He believed he was being modern and clever, utilizing technology to maintain his anonymity. In reality, he was handing the police the digital keys to his front door. When the disc arrived at the station and was handed over to forensic experts, it took only minutes to uncover the truth. They didn't just find the files Rader intended them to see. They found the metadata buried in the disk as a deleted space. The digital trail led directly to a computer at the Christ Lutheran Church. The metadata contained two devastating pieces of information: the name Dennis in the phrase Christ Lutheran Church. The shadow finally had a name, and the monster had a location. The investigators felt the floor drop out from under them. The killer was exactly who they feared, a man of God and a pillar of the community. The police quickly cross-referenced the name Dennis with the church's leadership and found Dennis Rader. He was a compliance officer, a husband, and a father. To the world, he was the definition of ordinary. But the detectives now had a target. They began a covert surveillance operation, watching as the man who passed the communion plate on Sunday performed his mundane daily tasks. They saw a man who looked like everyone else, yet they knew he carried the ghosts of 10 people in his shadow. The mask was still firmly in place, but for the first time in 30 years, the light was beginning to shine through the cracks. To confirm their suspicions, they needed DNA. They couldn't risk alerting Rader by taking a direct sample, so they looked toward his daughter, Carrie. Utilizing a legal loophole, they obtained a warrant for a DNA sample she had left at a university medical clinic years prior. The results were a perfect familial match. The DNA found at the BTK crime scenes belonged to the biological father of the girl in the records. The science was absolute. The man who had outsmarted Wichita for 3 decades had been brought down by his own blood and a simple purple disc. On February 25, 2005, the mask finally fell. Dennis Rader was driving his suburban truck when he was surrounded by a fleet of police vehicles. He didn't resist. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply sat there, perhaps realizing that his factor X had finally been outmaneuvered. When an officer approached him, Rader reportedly looked at him and said, "I think you know why you here." The transition from the Deacon of Christ Lutheran Church to the BTK serial killer was instantaneous and chilling. The 30-year masquerade was over. The news of his arrest sent a shockwave through the world that is still felt today. His neighbors in Park City refused to believe it, claiming the police had the wrong man. His fellow church members were physically ill at the thought of the hands that had served them bread being the same hands that had strangled children. But the most devastating blow was to his family. His wife and children were thrust into a nightmare they could never have imagined, forced to reconcile the man they loved with the monster that had been living in the room next door. Rader had not just killed his victims, he had obliterated the lives of everyone who ever knew him. In the interrogation room, Rader didn't cower. Instead, he began to speak with a sickening eagerness. He was happy to explain every detail, every knot, and every project. He treated the detectives like students, lecturing them on his methods and his achievements. He seemed relieved to finally be able to merge his two lives, to let the world see the artist he believed he was. He was no longer hiding, he was performing. The fatal mistake of the floppy disk had given him exactly what he wanted, a stage where everyone was forced to watch him. The Deacon of Darkness was finally unmasked, and the reality was more terrifying than any ghost story. When Dennis Rader finally stood in the courtroom in June 2005, the world expected to see a monster cowering in the light of justice. Instead, they witnessed something far more unsettling, a bureaucrat of death. Rader didn't offer a dramatic plea or a tearful apology. Instead, he delivered a cold, clinical, hours-long monologue detailing his 30-year career as a serial killer. In a steady, monotone voice, he spoke about his victims as if he were presenting a quarterly report at a business meeting. He corrected the judge on minor technicalities of his knots and the timing of his projects, showing a complete and utter absence of human remorse. He began with the Otero family, describing the morning of the massacre with a terrifying clarity. He spoke of the ropes, the plastic bags, and the sounds of the children with the same emotion one might use to describe a grocery list. For the families of the victims sitting in the gallery, it was a second assault. They were forced to listen to the man they once might have called neighbor explain how he systematically extinguished the lives of their loved ones. Rader wasn't just confessing, he was reliving his glory, savoring the opportunity to finally be the main character in a room full of people. The confession revealed the hidden depths of his depravity that even the police hadn't fully grasped. He spoke of his kitchen bags filled with murder tools that he kept hidden in his home and office, ready for the next factor X surge. He admitted to taking hundreds of photographs of himself in bondage, often wearing the masks or clothes of his victims, a private ritual of desecration that he had maintained, while serving as the president of his church council. This was the true face behind the mask, a man who nurtured a garden of rot while the world saw only a pillar of the community. As the details of his double life spilled out, the psychological horror became undeniable. Rader explained how he could murder a woman in the afternoon and then go home to a family dinner without a second thought. He described his mind as a series of locked rooms, where the Deacon and the Killer never had to meet. This was not a man who was out of control. This was a man who was in absolute, terrifying control of his own evil. He had managed to game the system, his religion, and his family for 3 decades, and he was clearly proud of his performance. Because the death penalty was not in effect in Kansas when the majority of his crimes were committed, Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, a minimum of 175 years without the possibility of parole. As the judge handed down the sentence, Rader remained stoic, perhaps realizing that he had achieved the legendary status he so desperately craved. He was no longer a boring compliance officer. He was a titan of true crime, a name that would be studied in textbooks for generations. He had traded his freedom for infamy into a narcissist like Rader. It was a bargain he was willing to make. The impact on his family was a tragedy of its own. His daughter, Carrie Rawson, would later describe the moment her world ended, the realization that the father who taught her to hike and love nature was the same man who hung a 9-year-old girl in a basement. The betrayal was total. Rader had poisoned every memory, every holiday, and every hug. He had just taken the lives of 10 strangers. He had effectively murdered the reality of his own wife and children, leaving them to navigate a world that would always see them through the lens of his atrocities. Today, Dennis Rader sits in a cell at the El Dorado Correctional Facility, an old man stripped of his clipboard, his badge, and his Bible. He occasionally reaches out to journalists or researchers, still trying to manipulate the narrative and keep the spotlight on himself. But the world has largely moved on, shifting its focus from the killer to the survivors and the lives he stole. He is a prisoner not just of the state, but of his own fading relevance, a predator who was finally outpaced by chiming truth. The legacy of the BTK Killer changed the landscape of criminal investigation forever. It proved that forensic genealogy and digital metadata are the new frontiers of justice, capable of reaching back through decades to unmask a ghost. It also served as a sobering lesson for society. The mask of sanity is real. We learned that evil does not always wear a snarl. Sometimes it wears a smile, a suit, and a cross. It taught us that the person holding the door for you might be the same one waiting for you to sleep. The city of Wichita has found a way to heal, though the scars are permanent. The parks where Rader once trolled for victims are now places of peace. In the church where he once led prayer groups has moved forward under new leadership. The community chose to remember the names of the victims de Otero, Shirley Vian, Nancy Fox, Marine Hedge, Vicky Wegerle, and Dolores Davis, ensuring that their humanity outshines the darkness of their killer. They are the true center of the story, not the man who tried to erase them. In the end, Dennis Rader's story is a cautionary tale about the duality of the human soul. He tried to be both a saint and a monster, believing he was clever enough to keep the two worlds from colliding. But the truth is like water. It finds every crack, every weakness, and eventually, it breaks the dam. The man who held a Bible in one hand and a rope in the other was ultimately just a man, small, cruel, and caught. The mask is gone, and all that remains is the cold, hard reality of a life wasted on the pursuit of pain. The unmask of Dennis Rader remains one of the most chilling chapters in the history of true crime. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that we may never truly know the people who live among us. For 30 years, the Deacon of Darkness proved that a well-crafted mask is the most dangerous weapon a predator can possess. But his story also proves that no matter how long the shadow lingers, the light eventually finds its way in. Rader's ego is his architect, but it is also his executioner, leading him directly into a trap that he never saw coming. As we close this chapter on Behind the Mask, we honor the memory of the 10 innocent souls whose lives were cut short by Rader's Factor X. Their stories are a reminder of the fragility of peace and the resilience of justice. We thank you for joining us on this journey into the dark heart of Wichita, Kansas. If this deep dive into the dual life of the BTK Killer left you with questions about the nature of evil in the masks we all wear, then our mission is complete. Thank you for watching. Please remember to share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know which country you are watching from. If you haven't yet, subscribe to join our community of investigators. Your support allows us to keep digging for the truth hidden behind the world's most terrifying masks. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and always remember to look a little closer at the world around you. This is Behind the Mask.